Hello, hello, hello. Hope everyone's having a good day today. As the title of my video says, I'm going to be looking at a few Eric July comics. Now, the last one that I remember was Yaira, I think it was Yaira 2, or the first Yaira book that I remember being the most important. There's a few other ones, so I'm going to be taking a look at some of his current ones that he did after Yaira. I found a good channel here. Let me do this one sec. Got my buddy here, Mike Partalka. So that's good to know. And he's done a few of these videos so far. So I'll just go over a couple of these, see what he has some insight on. Because these Ripper books are vary in quality, and they might look all right, but I'm like, I don't read that much into the superhero genre that much, really. So let me go to this first video here. I'll go with which one should I start with? I'll do this first one and go work my way down.
I am trying. Okay, folks, welcome to my next review dealing with Rippaverse's first anthology book, Saints and Sinners. Today we're looking at the story A Cross to Bear by writer Jay David and interior artist Chris Bolson. As the corresponding variant cover for Saints and Sinners shows, the story is about an unconscious guy lying in the middle of the street in present-day Florist Park. As with the previous story, Chasing Ghosts by Heel vs. Babyface, we're unnecessarily told that this story is set in the present day. But I confess that due to one of Rippaverse's most famous screw-ups, which I'll be bringing up later, knowing for sure that we're dealing with now is actually helpful for this story. So our protagonist wakes up lying in the middle of the street for no reason, with no idea where he is, no idea who he is, and definitely no idea why his hands are going snap, crackle, pop. Right then he happens upon a mugging in an alley, and instead of jumping in to save the day like we'd expect from any typical comic book protagonist, he instead flashes back to the good old military days where he literally could not care less about muggings or any other kind of crime, as evidenced by the fact that he's ordered to go on a genocidal killing spree in some anonymous Middle Eastern village, and he has absolutely no problem carrying out his orders. Yes, that's him literally slaughtering the woman and her children. He's snapped back from his reverie by the sound of one of the muggers calling him Cross. Actually, the muggers just want the gold cross around our protagonist's neck. Our protagonist responds with a roundhouse kick that's somehow both fast enough and powerful enough to knock down both muggers at once. Then he asks them, what?
Okay, so I can start. Looks like he has some electricity-like powers. But, I don't see how he could have kicked both of them at the same time. Maybe one or the other, not both at once. The scene isn't really it's too fast for my liking.
What did you call me? Because he also appears to have forgotten how he dressed himself today. They're not talking about your name, buddy. They're talking about your jewelry. Right then, the police arrive, so everyone except our protagonist evacuates the scene. At this point, it looks like 2 cop cars pull up, but I think the artist's intent was to show a single car, initially coming in on the left and then making a U-turn to end up in the center. Because for the rest of this police encounter, we never see any cops besides these 2 cops or any cop car besides the one visible here. So the leftmost cop says they got a call about a fight breaking out, and if you're not paying attention, you're probably going to think, as I did at first, that the cop is referring to the brief altercation between our protagonist and the muggers. But that's impossible. There's no way some onlooker witnessed this roundhouse kick, decided to call 911, went and got a phone, called 911, gave the dispatcher the location information, and then the dispatcher gave this info to the cops, who had to take the dispatcher's call, all in the, at most, 30 seconds that transpired between the roundhouse kick and the cop's arrival.
Okay, that is kind of true. A police report wouldn't be that quick and have that fast of a response time.
I suspect what this cop is actually referring to is whatever fight laid out our protagonist in the middle of the street and cost him his memory. But whatever the case, the cop tells our protagonist in the usual cop way to stop right where he is. But our hero says, "You're not the boss of me," and he actually tackles the cop, while the cop's partner draws his taser. And here the artist and editors show that Rippaverse still doesn't understand how to properly use inset panels. This inset panel is not only horribly dull and positioned a little too far left to properly sequence its place in time, but it's also totally unnecessary, and I can almost guarantee you how it got here. Originally, there was no inset panel. You just had the protagonist crashing into the one cop while the other cop looks on. But then the next panel shows our hero getting tased by the other cop, and this led somebody to wonder, when did the other cop draw his taser? Are Rippaverse readers smart enough to realize the cop must have drawn his taser between panels? That somebody apparently didn't think so and ordered the artist to draw an inset panel explaining the obvious. So remember, the next time Rippaverse tells you, we don't hold our readers' hands, sometimes they totally do. Anyway, our boy gets tased, and that causes him to go all Sparky McSparkerson, so the cops take him to the hospital and strap him to a bed. When he wakes up, he's surrounded by none other than Mick Davies and 2 men in black. Davies takes the 2 men in black out into the hall to discuss things, and here's where we learn that in present-day Florist Park, Mick Davies is a detective. I guess after being such an abusive boss and botching his handling of Yaira's return, he got busted down to detective from his previous role as chief of police.
Yeah, Mick Davies is a white police chief.
So it looks like we can.
Okay, so from what I can tell, there's way too many characters here. This is getting like the Marvel treatment. What Eric should have done, he should have maybe put his comic book series universe into like phases, kind of like how Marvel did it. Where in the first phase, you have the first few main Marvel characters, and slowly build up the universe instead of every single comic having hints and potential spin-offs for the next one. Like that's what I would have done. Like, okay, here's my main guy. Here's my these amount of issues for his main guy. Boom. And the next one, Yaira, have her comic series. Boom. And slowly build it up. Build up to like a Dread, like a Thanos level Dread, or something similar to that. Instead of all these characters all at once. Like, look at this. It's too much for like an average comic book fan to really understand everything and have everything all remembered and memorized.
Can safely say we're down to 2 Mick Davies in the Rippaverse now, with the police chief having been busted back down to detective. Whether this white detective Mick Davies will ever meet his black detective Mick Davies counterpart from Horseman Welcome to Florispark remains to be seen. Anyway, as Davies and the men in black bicker in the hallway, our protagonist uses his electrical powers to pull a Houdini, because that's just how physics work in the Rippaverse. Then our boy eats up an entire splash page, jumping through the hospital window to escape. Because why waste a page on, I don't know, telling an actual story, when you can just show your character performing some dramatic act surrounded by broken glass and lightning? By the way, do you remember that other Rippaverse book where the main character escapes from a hospital? This story is so original. Now, because this razor-thin hospital room door is somehow completely soundproof, nobody in the hallway heard the glass-shattering escape take place, so the sheer surprise prompts Detective Davies to finally ask the million-dollar question: who is this guy? The men in black decide, what the heck, let's throw all our secrets out the busted window too. And that's when we find out our protagonist is a cyborg named Cameron Cross. That's right, his honest-to-God last name is Cross. Our protagonist actually had reason to think the muggers were calling him by name and not just demanding his jewelry. How serendipitous is that? I bet in the next Rippaverse anthology he gets a piano dropped on him and we find out his middle name is Steinway. So Cross ends up finding a church, taking some donated clothes, and kneeling before the altar praying for anyone to help him remember who he is. As he's praying, a man stands off in the distance. Who is the man? It's Buddy Christ. Nah, just kidding. We don't actually find out who the man is because the story just ends right there. Seriously, any hope you had of a satisfying plot resolution gets sucked right into the black hole of artistic incompetence, which makes this excerpt from J. David's dedication page particularly galling. It's an honor to have the opportunity to create and write for Cameron Cross, a character with such depth, complexity, and untapped potential. Dang, dude, you fluff yourself much? There's nothing deep, complex, or untapped about Cameron Cross that movies like Soldier, Universal Soldier, and even Bloodshot haven't already explored. Moreover, this is a guy who cold-bloodedly murdered women and children in his pre-amnesia life and attacks cops in his post-amnesia life. Tell me again why I should care about this guy? The only thing he's got going for him is amnesia, and that's been done to death, by the way. Plus, the only real mystery still worth anything by the end of the story is how our guy ended up an amnesiac in the middle of the street in the first place. But I can't really force myself to care about that when I don't even care about the guy himself. Are we supposed to care because he wears a cross around his neck and ends up kneeling in a church? I think most of us comic book readers have been around long enough to know the trappings of religion alone do not a good person make. Honestly, what the story lacks and what it really, really needs is a save the cat moment. That is, a moment where you generate good feelings in the reader for your character, either by figuratively or even actually having him save a cat, or I would argue, by having him be a cat in need of saving himself. For example, there's a scene in Sylvester Stallone's Rocky where both kinds of save the cat techniques are used at once. Rocky walks a young girl home to protect her and tries to impart some life advice on the way so she'll keep out of trouble. But in the end, she rejects his advice and even insults him. Rocky's demonstration of goodness, followed by getting crapped on for his goodness, makes us empathize with him. And from that point on, you want to see him succeed. This story lacks any such moment, and what's mind-boggling is that the opportunity for such a moment was right in front of us. You could have had the protagonist rescue the woman being mugged, but instead of saving the cat, you had him blank out and flash back to a moment where he once performed the equivalent of clubbing a whole pod of baby seals to death. You had him set the cat on fire, you psychopath! God only knows what you're exposing kids to in your children's books. Now I'm actually glad it's just Lucifer Valentine's apprentices who wrote an
What the? Okay, I wouldn't read this, and I wouldn't read this. These like stories maybe my nieces and nephews might read, but not me. I like quality stuff, not this.
all-ages book for Rippaverse. Across the Bear is one of the absolute worst stories in Saints and Sinners #1, precisely because nobody sane would want to bear the cross of such an absolutely reprehensible, unlikable character. If we'd been shown some good aspect of this guy, care for others, respect for authority, some cautiousness with hospital infrastructure, or at least been shown how all the good aspects of him had been artificially suppressed, that would have been one thing. But it's entirely another thing to hand us a guy who seems little more than a live grenade and then ask us to cradle him to our breast. I think we should save our affection for a more worthy character and save any praise for a more worthy story. I'm Mike Partika. If you haven't followed me on each of these platforms yet, I urge you to do so. You never know when the band hammer is going to fall on my YouTube channel the way it fell on my X account. So here are multiple ways you can keep current with me if something bad happens. Plus, I occasionally publish content exclusively to Rumble and BitChute. I've also got a Blue Sky account now, so feel free to check me out there too. We've got 4 more stories to go before I deliver the overall score for Saints and Sinners #1, so make sure you're subscribed to get notified when those reviews drop. Once again, I'm Mike Partika. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you later.
Okay, that was a good, informative video. I'm looking forward to the other issues he's going to review. And just to make sure I am ready, I'll do a little quick subscribe with the notifications on, so I'm ready whenever he makes another one. Okay, what's the next one he's got?
HitPaw Edamacore. It is an AI-powered video editor. You can effortlessly create.
God, no. There we go.
Hey folks, welcome to my review of the short story from Ripazine #4, titled Catch and Kill. Catch and kill is a media term for when a news outlet buys exclusive rights to a story, but then refuses to publish the story so that the news won't get out. This tale by the Soska sisters and artist Sebastian Garcia is precisely the kind of story that needed such euthanasia, but didn't get it. By the way, this is the first Ripazine for which I've ever cheaped out and bought the $8 standard edition instead of the $20 collector's edition. I just happen to like the standard edition's cover better this time. Little did I know, however, that on the inside cover of the standard edition would be a virgin version of the collector's edition cover, which means that the 3 times I purchased the $20 Ripazine collector's edition because I wanted those covers specifically, it was for no good reason, because the standard editions were going to give me those covers on the inside anyway. So in purchasing the first 3 Ripazine collector's editions, I've been bilked out of $36. Good to know. The short story opens with some captions that read, "To find the truth, you have to be willing to go to the source, to go the extra mile, and get your hands dirty, because the truth is rarely clean." We can safely assume this is going to be the theme of the story, so points to the Soska sisters for opening the story in this fashion. In the next panel, we're introduced to our narrator and main character, Winslow Valiant, investigative reporter. Plus, we're given a couple more captions defining his primary motivations. I'm not afraid to follow a story. I'm more afraid of what happens if I don't. Evil prospers when good men do nothing. This is a great character setup because it introduces us right away to the fear that motivates the character. Motivation can come in two forms. It can be something you're chasing, or it can be something that's chasing you. And in this character introduction here and in the previous panel, the Saska sisters have managed to give us both kinds of motivation. Winslow Valiant is seeking the truth, as most reporters do, but there's also something likely in his past that makes him afraid to not seek the truth. Now we're curious about both the personality and the history of what otherwise might have been a cookie-cutter reporter character. I don't particularly care for this inset panel, though. Inset panels are really for giving different perspectives of what's going on in the larger panel. For example, you might have a larger panel of someone firing a gun with multiple inset panels showing other characters reacting to the gun. Or maybe your inset panels show things that are going on at the same time as what's happening in the larger panel. Like maybe Doctor Doom is lecturing the Avengers while in an inset panel the Wasp is fiddling with some circuitry in Doctor Doom's armor. What an inset panel generally doesn't do is carry on the next sequential action in the story unless it's closely tied to the larger panel. Like when a character is talking about what will happen if he presses a button, and then in the inset panel the character actually presses the button. But here, the inset panel moves us on entirely from the larger panel scene. This is scene 1 and scene 2 being depicted here, and in cases like this, you should just use a separate panel. Also, if portions of successive panels have similar background colors that make it hard to keep them easily distinguished, as in the case here where the dark top of the second panel blends in with the dark top of the first panel, then use a panel border to split the panels. There's nothing wrong with panel borders. And in all cases, remember my general rule. If there are standard practices like regular panels and panel borders that will tell the story just fine, use the standard practices. The real time to get creative is when the standard practices won't work. Winslow starts handing out food and drink to the homeless, whom he uses as informants. When he learns that one of his regular and most valuable informants has gone missing, he traces the missing homeless man to a pharmaceutical company called Aztec that sponsors a charity for homeless veterans called Valor Outreach. Here, Valiant says something interesting. Just one look and I have the whole place committed to memory. And this statement is interesting more for just its arguable lack of a comma. I would have skipped over that, but I have to give my viewers at least one punctuation correction per video so that they get their autism fix. Rather, this statement implies Valiant has some sort of photographic memory, which is obviously handy for a reporter, but not extraordinary, although it is much rarer than popular fiction has led people to believe. However, later in the story, Valiant goes so far as to refer to himself as an accept, which means there might be more to his having the whole place committed to memory than just knowledge of the building's exterior. Maybe he can look at a building and instinctively understand its floor plan and exits. Or maybe not. This is one of those cases where the writers could have just said what they mean, but God forbid they hold your hand. When Winslow gets back to the office, he's immediately called in to see his editor-in-chief, Gang Ji Gao. And here I have to take my hat off to the Saska sisters for making me laugh out loud in a good way. Anyone familiar with Spider-Man comics will know that the hot-tempered editor-in-chief in those books is named J. Jonah Jameson, sometimes called JJJ for short. So seeing that Winslow Valiant's editor-in-chief is GGG is a real hoot. I just wish Sebastian Garcia had taken some time to make GGG look as memorable as JJJ. I mean, come on, this Asian guy looks like an average white dude. If you're going to have an Asian guy be editor-in-chief, go balls out and draw an Asian guy like James Hong. Or, if you need a younger guy, Daniel Day Kim. It's just like with the Horsemen. If you're going to bother delivering us a Mexican-American superhero, I want a guy who looks like his dad pushed a lawnmower 6 days a week. Give us visual diversity to go with that racial diversity. Anyway, when Valiant enters Gao's office, we get a bad case of dialogue and art getting out of sync. Gao is facing Winslow the whole time he's talking, but all of Gao's dialogue is directed at the female character standing behind Gao by the window. Gao's head should be turned towards the woman. This caption sounds like a cheesy pulp noir line. Before I see her face, she's already taken my breath away. But it's actually not, because what takes his breath away is not the woman's figure, which we can't see anyway, but the woman's photographs lying on Gao's desk. Although these photos might not look like much to us, they apparently impress Valiant a great deal. The person who snapped these photos is photojournalist Betty Brooke, whose name should be emphasized here, and Winslow offers up a little bit of humorous banter that doesn't quite land because the last two sentences are out of order. These lines should read, "You've read my work, comma, good boy, and you still took the job? Miss Brooke, it is a pleasure." Note also this handshake because it's going to come up later. Winslow is thoroughly entranced by Betty's pictures, gruesome as they are, and here we get a clue to a nagging question that's been around since the Great War of Separation #1. Somewhere in America, there is a dead zone to the north called the Wastelands. If you recall my first review on the Great War of Separation #1, I pointed out that on the Rippaverse map of pre-war North America, there's a large area of land that isn't claimed by any nation. So because of its shape, I called it Olympus Dicus. But I think it's safe to say now that this area is properly called the Wastelands, no doubt owing to this large circular area of ground that it contains. Apparently some unnatural catastrophe occurred there. Whatever the case, it's nice to have that little knowledge gap filled in because that has been bugging me. I will miss the name Olympus Dicus, though. Gao assigns Betty Brooke to be Winslow Valiant's photographer, saying that he expects Betty to keep Valiant in line because Winslow has a bad habit of inflicting his insanity on his partners, which causes them to ruin their credibility. Which makes no sense. The reputation of a news outlet depends on its ability to print stories that hold up under scrutiny. If Gao thinks Valiant is reporting insane, credibility-killing stories, then why is Valiant even employed at Gao's newspaper? If Valiant's such a shoddy reporter, then the only kind of news outlet he's fit for is a tabloid rag like the Inquirer. But if Gao's newspaper is a tabloid rag, why would he care about credibility-ruining insanity since that's basically what his paper publishes on the regular? This premise makes even less sense when Betty later whips out a photo of Shadran, no less, and says, "This photo was dubbed a fake, and so was I." So one of her photos ruined her own credibility, and now Gao's hired her to keep Winslow's reporting credible? What kind of logic chain is that? You hired a discredited photographer to keep a credibility-straining reporter in line? That's like a high school hiring P. Diddy to chaperone kids at prom. I'm sorry, but this story is already dead to me for making no freaking sense. However, there are still lessons to be learned from it, so let's keep digging its grave. One glaring issue is how Winslow and Betty become fast friends right away. Far from being Scully to Winslow's Mulder, Betty is in the tank for Valiant from the jump, and after she shows him the Shadran photo, he's in the tank for her too. There's no time spent feeling out each other's boundaries or keeping a safe emotional/professional distance. They just met, and it's already the two of them against the world. Later, we see the pair at a crime scene where one of the missing homeless persons lies dead, and Betty is using the most ridiculously simple camera I've ever seen in the hands of a news photographer. For comparison, here's an actual gaggle of news photographers with their work equipment. It doesn't look to me like Sebastian Garcia spent even a minute looking up any reference for Betty's camera. Getting back to the story, Winslow worms his way into the morgue to get a look at the homeless person's body. The cops had to shoot the homeless guy 45 times after he attacked them with Accept-level strength. Winslow suspects that some kind of drug the guy was injected with transformed him somehow. In the next panel, we learn that Winslow has been taking DNA-altering injections from Aztec since his accident in the Wastelands. Wait, what? Winslow's never been to the Wastelands? He indicated as much when he said, "I thought access was forbidden to the press," about Betty's Wasteland pictures. So who's talking here? Is it Betty? Yeah, it's Betty. But heaven forbid anybody signal right away to us that the narrator has changed. We have to wait for this second caption to let us know. So apparently Betty's been taking drugs for some condition she's had since something bad happened to her in the Wastelands. We don't know what this condition is, but it can't be good because not only will she not come forward about it right away, but also when she and Winslow stop at a diner to meet with one of his other contacts, she sees a reflection of what I'm guessing is her self-image in the window, and it isn't pretty. Taking into account the Soska sisters' obsession with body horror, we can now safely guess what happens to Betty's looks when she doesn't take her medicine. Of course, she's not too worried about her condition because she's too busy being absolutely smitten with Valiant, which hurts the believability of the story for being too much too soon. Not to mention that she's telling us how his looking at her makes her feel good when she's already revealed that how she looks now doesn't reflect how she sees herself. It's hard to believe she would think his not seeing her as she thinks she really is a testament to his character. His beer goggles appreciation for her facade, as she sees it, shouldn't score him any points with her, yet it does. It's just more upside-down logic from the Soska sisters. After bribing his contact for a janitor's badge to get access to Aztec's headquarters, Winslow invites Betty to join him on his mission to sneak into the place. And here we encounter the absolute worst narrative mistake of the entire story. We are flat out told by this caption box that Betty's accident in the wastelands resulted in her acquiring a death touch that kills anyone who touches her bare hands. This is not something we needed to know at this point. In fact, it's something we absolutely should not know at this point. Why? Because there's a principle in writing called Chekhov's gun, which says that if you call attention to a gun in Act 1, you have to fire the gun by Act 3. We've just been told Betty has a death touch. By the principle of Chekhov's gun, readers are now going to spend the rest of the story waiting for that inevitable moment when she unleashes her death touch, when they should be staying present with the characters as they snoop through the Aztec offices. Giving the readers knowledge of this death touch so soon is a complete storytelling faceplant. Better the whole caption box be removed entirely so that we're mystified by her silent hesitation at taking his hand than have her secret spilled to us this early in the story. But there's still another problem. This is not the first time they've held hands. Remember this scene? Where was her hesitation to take Winslow's hand then? This was the time to say something like, "I don't shake hands." For that matter, she seems awful free with her hand here in the collector's edition cover art. She's not really acting like a person with a death touch would around a friend, or especially a love interest. Of course, logical consistency is not the Rippaverse's strong suit. Along those lines, it's kind of galling that even while they're in the potentially criminal act of snooping around inside Aztec, Betty cannot stop internally gushing over Valiant. "My heart is racing. It's not because of breaking into Aztec. It's not the poison running through my veins. It's being this close to Winslow. I feel like my heart could burst out of my chest, but in a nice way." These captions are nauseating. They just met. There is no reason for her to be falling head over heels for him like this. Also, please note that Betty's death touch must be localized to her hands because her arms are bare, so she must not be worried about the possibility of Winslow's grabbing one of her bare arms with one of his bare hands, as could easily happen in a tense situation like this. To be fair, this is actually consistent with what she said earlier. It's the gloves that keep the rest of the world safe from her. However, considering she's wearing long sleeves such that we don't know from these panels how long her gloves are, it's not actually intuitive that only her hands are the source of her death touch. Why wouldn't the rest of her skin be just as dangerous? But since I've already argued that we shouldn't have learned about her death touch from these panels anyway, I'm not going to dwell on this. So the elevator dings, and out walk the two biggest doofus villains in the Rippaverse, Michael Copper and Lillian Renashi. And oh my god, do they come ready with doofus dialogue galore. "I am so tired of this crap, Michael." "Yes, you've been exceedingly patient." "That better not be sarcasm." "I would never dream of it." "I have been so patient, Michael." "No one is more patient." "Don't I deserve to be happy?" "No one is more deserving of happiness." I mean, even our protagonists here look dumbfounded over what crap dialogue this is. And
Okay, I agree with that. It's too basic. The dialogue is too basic of a thing to use. You need better wording. Give the characters more flavor to their personality instead of just basic words like that. Given their character designs, I would give them more of a Bruce Wayne guy, and she looked like a Cassandra, or what's her name? That is that DC assassin from the League of Shadows. I forget her name, but her. That's what she reminds me of, and they should have dialogue that matches their designs, not just this weak banter.
"And exceedingly patient." "That better not be sarcasm." "I would never dream of it." "I have been so patient, Michael." "No one is more patient." "Don't I deserve to be happy?" "No one is more deserving of happiness." I mean, even our protagonists here look dumbfounded over what crap dialogue this is. And it just goes on and on. Where is my Brian Solari? Why is everyone so stupid? Why can't they be intelligent like me? It baffles the mind, darling. We hire Nyo and Ronson, we pay them good money, and all they do is screw us. I know it's very frustrating. These things take time. We're improving the recipe without the previous mistakes. Look at me, Michael. I am a princess and I'm being treated like the wicked stepsisters. What is she even talking about? Why is she berating the intelligence of scientists trying to make her another Brian Solari when it's obvious she isn't intelligent enough to make one herself? And why is she looking at an x-ray of a normal hand? And why are we shown Winslow's eye here? Is it so we're clear that he's taking note of how she's inexplicably looking at an x-ray of a normal hand? Honest to God, if this is the level of writing that the Saska sisters plan to bring to their individual books on these two dopey villains, I should just...
Okay, so I guess they are the two villains. So we got the Black Eye Club and Cursed. The Cursed. So she seems more like a Scarlet Witch type of figure, and the other guy looks more like maybe he's like this version's Kingpin kind of guy.
just give up on reviewing these books right away. I know I won't, but I should. Anyway, unfortunately for Winslow and Betty, Michael realizes the pair have overheard his and Lillian's conversation. So he redirects their elevator to the sub-basement because, of course, the conference room Michael and Lillian are in contain a set of master controls for the elevators. Don't all office buildings come with conference rooms that control the elevators? My God, it's like the Saska sisters gave up on writing a coherent story and hoped we wouldn't notice. Turns out the sub-basement contains the homeless guy Valiant was looking for all along, only he's already been injected with whatever juice the doofusy duo are testing out on the homeless, so he morphs into Doomsday Light, and that's when we're treated to another round of text and art being catastrophically out of sync. Winslow moves his body in front of what used to be Mickey, she says, as she's obviously moved herself between Winslow and Mickey. And then she finally does what we've known has been coming for at least 7 pages now. It's not visually striking in the least. The guy just says, "Gak," and collapses. And what is up with all the brown gas in this panel? Did the guy let out a giant fart when he died? Did she? I mean, the guy is saying, "Betty." Last but not least, Winslow and Betty bring the story and photographic evidence to their editor, Gao, but Michael Copper performs a catch and kill on the story by having his newspaper buy the story from Gao, which is not how catch and kill actually works. Newspapers don't buy stories from other newspapers. They buy stories from individuals in exchange for a legally binding contract that says you can't tell this story to anyone else. That's the catch part. The kill part is when the paper that bought the story refuses to publish it themselves, and now because of the contract saying nobody else can tell this story, now the story can't be told by anyone. So in the real world, what would have happened here was that either Michael Copper himself or one of his and Lillian's corporations would have threatened Gao with a lawsuit, and Gao would have settled out of court for a cash payment in exchange for signing an NDA and turning over all the evidence on Aztec's misdealings. It wouldn't have been Michael's newspaper buying the story from Gao's newspaper. So far as I've researched, that just doesn't happen. But then again, it's the Rippaverse, so who knows how things work there. Anyway, Winslow and Betty are left to stew in their complete impotence, and the story ends with a "to be continued," as if we actually want more of this crap. Now it's time for the overall score, and honestly, scoring this book was not terribly difficult. Sebastian Garcia is an adequate artist, but his visual choices could definitely use some work. Meanwhile, the writing shares numerous qualities with one of the Saska sisters' previous offerings, Bloodruth #1, which is why I'm putting Catch and Kill right down there with it. This short story has the same everything in the kitchen sink too feel that Bloodruth #1 had, as if the Saska sisters know that every Rippaverse book is potentially the last one the company might ever publish, so they'd better put all their ideas into the present book rather than let the book focus on 1 or 2 good story elements and allow the rest of their ideas to spread out over time. For example, this section concerning Chadron and the Wastelands just bowls the narrative right over, such that when we're forced back into the missing homeless person story, it's a letdown. Moreover, the Saska sisters have written themselves into a corner with giving Betty a death touch. What's going to happen in future stories? We're always going to be wondering whether she's going to kill someone or not, because those are her only options. Why not instead lean into the body horror aspect and give her the ability to unleash her real monstrous form to defend herself or Valiant when needed, and have the attraction between them be based on the fact that he can still see her heart inside the monstrosity she becomes? Then a later story could focus on how she got that way and cover her history in the wastelands. As for Winslow Valiant's power, that seems to be something along the lines of seeing things clearly. Sometimes I feel a little like Winslow Valiant myself, in that I have the ability to clearly see what stories like this could have been, but sadly weren't. If only the editors at Rippaverse had this ability, because then they definitely would have caught and killed this story before it went to press. Thank you for watching. If you found the information in this video helpful, please hit like and also hype if it's available. Both of those buttons will get this video in front of more eyes. Also, please subscribe if you haven't already so that you'll receive notifications of my next videos. I'm not sure what or when my next review will be, but my copies of Yaira number 3 and Saints and Sinners have arrived, so there will be more Rippaverse reviews in the near future, as well as reviews of properties from Comicsgate and other independent publishers. So make sure you're subscribed to be notified when those videos arrive. And don't forget to follow me on these free-to-use alt-tech platforms where I also post content and communicate with viewers. I'm Mike Partika. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you later.
Okay, so that seems like this is more like a detective-like story. Not really my cup of tea. I prefer more fantasy / sci-fi type of stuff in my comics and stories. So this didn't really sell me that much. Okay, let's see what else we got here.
Okay, folks, it's time. It's time for the Yaira #1 reviews. And this one is entitled Rippaverse Still Has No Editors. Now, Mike, I can already hear you complaining. That can't be true. According to the credits of Yaira #1, there are 4 editors. You've got Andrew Rodriguez as lead editor, Kanan White as lead art editor, Alan Ford as copy editor, and of course Eric July as editor-in-chief. Yeah, but are any of them worth a darn? Well, let's see. Starting with the opening blurb. The opening blurb in a comic is usually one of two things. It can be a quick description of the hero of the comic, the concept of the comic, the hero concept, and basically something along the lines of, Peter Parker, bitten by a radioactive spider, soon learns that with great power comes great responsibility. That's one way to do an opening blurb. The other way, and this is the way it's used in Yaira #1, is to kind of catch a reader up on events that have taken place in the past so that the reader can come in from the cold pretty much and not have to go back and read prior issues. And that's how this opening blurb is structured. After being told to go away and never return, the Except, known only as Yaira, has reappeared, but this time in Florispark. Who she is and what she wants is veiled in mystery. After clashing with Avery and dropping him from a height that would kill a normal man, Yaira must now escape the Alpha Core. Okay, so this is basically trying to get you into page 1 of the comic without you having to go back and read ISOM #1, which is the place from where the opening blurb gets all this information. We see in the opening, we see in ISOM #1 how Yaira has returned to Florispark 2 weeks ago. After 2 weeks, she's confronted by Alpha Core, who reminds her that she was told not to come back. She also encounters Avery Silman, the retired superhero formerly known as ISOM, and drops him from a great height so that he falls onto a taxi or a yellow car right in front of Alpha Core. So all of that opening blurb information, it comes from ISOM #1, and the idea is that if you've never read ISOM #1, you should be able to hit the ground running knowing what you know now. But is that true? I mean, who is this blurb really written for? And the reason I ask that is because the the people who have read ISOM #1 are going to understand things in this blurb that the people who have not read ISOM #1 are going to understand. For example, who's Avery? I mean, why should a person who has not read ISOM #1 have any idea who this Avery person is? I mean, Avery is ISOM. Why don't you just call him ISOM? You have the name ISOM. It's one of your book's names. Why can't you use it? I mean, come on now. It's almost like there's something that's restricting you from using the name ISOM, and so you have to use the name Avery instead, or else you're going to incur some kind of penalty or something. I don't know. It's just really weird. I don't know why. In describing what happened between Yaira and Avery prior, Eric July just doesn't use the name ISOM. So anyway, you got Avery here. Nobody's going to know who Avery is if they're coming in cold. They're not even going to know who or what Florispark is. They don't. How are they supposed to know that's a city in Texas, a fictional city in Texas? Person coming in from the cold isn't going to know what Alpha Core is either. So who is this blurb really written for? Is it just written to remind people who read ISOM #1 of what happened in that book? Or is this really supposed to catch somebody up who is coming in just absolutely flat cold? I don't think it works very well in the latter sense. And it doesn't particularly work all that great in the former sense either. It doesn't work great for either people who have not read anything before or who are familiar with the books, because let's look at this problem. Never return to where? We hear that Yaira has reappeared, but this time in Florispark. Well, where did she appear before? She was told to go away and never return. I assume that she was told to go away and never return to the place where she's reappeared, which would be Florispark. You know, when Brian Solari is confronting her and saying, you were told not to come back, and they're in Florispark, I'm assuming that the place that she was not told to come back to is Florispark. I mean, where else would it have been? And if it's some city other than Florispark that they first encountered each other, well, he never told her not to come back to Florispark, so what's his beef? Now, the only other thing that I could think of is, well, maybe he told her not to come back to Texas, generally speaking. But nobody who read ISOM #1 read that sentence that way. If that's what he meant, he should have said that explicitly so that we, the readers, would have known that. So, yeah, this is all kind of messed up. Also, known only as Yaira? I mean, excuse me, but I read ISOM #2, and I happen to know that she has another identity. She actually is a consultant named Sally, don't know her last name yet, but she works for Lincoln Eusebio at Projexis. So she's not known only as Yaira. I mean, come on, if you want to bring together both old readers and new readers and be able to hit the ground running with this particular blurb, you're going to need something that's like this. Dr. Sally Rodell, a consultant working for the Mammoth Corporation Projexis, is also the mysterious ice-controlling Except known as Yaira. 2 weeks ago, Yaira ended her years-long exile and returned to Florispark, Texas. What Yaira wants, what she is still unknown, but all may be revealed after her brutal treatment of retired superhero Avery Silman brings her into conflict with her old nemesis Brian Solari and his fellow supercops in Alpha Corps. See, this gives pretty much all of the information that a reader could need, whether from ISOM, coming from ISOM #1 and #2, or just coming in from the cold. You can pretty much figure out everything you need to know to get into the first page of the book, which starts here. Now, this is the first page, and it starts with people pointing at the sky, looking up into the sky, and Avery Silman, we can presume, falls out of the sky onto this car, and then Yaira floats above him saying, "Do not follow me," and then flies off. Okay, if you've read ISOM #1, this scene is going to be problematic right away. Reason being that in ISOM #1, Yaira dropped Avery and just flew off. She didn't descend later. In fact, she dropped him and he fell and hit the car right in front of Alpha Corps, who were right there at the time he hit the car. So if she actually is hovering over him after he's hit the car, then one of two things must be true. Either this is a retcon of some point, in which she actually had time to come down and tell Avery, "Do not follow me," and then fly off, and then Alpha Corps arrive. Or Yaira's a freaking idiot, and she actually came down out of the sky while Alpha Corps was there around the car to tell Avery, who is the only person we see on the panel, so that's the person we naturally think she's going to be talking to. She tells Avery, "Don't follow me," and she's put herself in range of Alpha Corps, which is stupid. I mean, the whole point of dropping him like that is to, like, create a distraction so she can get away. Why in the hell would you come down and hover over the guy and when it just puts you in range of your enemies? So either this is a retcon, and we're already having retcons in the Rippaverse, or Yaira is stupid. Which is it? Well, you turn the page and you find out Yaira is stupid. Alpha Corps actually is there, and she's put herself within range. There's Braxwell on top. He's checking Avery Silman, who for some reason does not have facial hair. So there's a goober right there. And then Brian Solari says that Ingrid and I will pursue Yaira. Now, this is flat ass in contradiction to what we read in ISOM #2, those of us who read ISOM #2, where Brian Solari tells Ingrid Valdez, "I did not simply let Yaira go this time. Braxwell and I went in pursuit after she nearly killed that man. I engaged all aerial communications and she has disappeared." Okay, so in ISOM number 2, Solari explains to Ingrid Valdez that Braxwell and him went after Yaira. But in Yaira number 1, it's Ingrid and him who go after Yaira, and Braxwell's the one who stays behind. Now, this is problematic because the Soska sisters who wrote Yaira number 1 are also supposed to be the keepers of the lore. They're the ones who are supposed to make sure that continuity errors don't happen. And here they just wrote a doozy right into their own damn book. Oh, man. Now, I will say that I do think I have a solution where we can use the ISOM number 2 stuff to explain something that happens later on, but we'll have to get to that part later. It's not a complete disaster, but it nearly was. All right, so now we have Solari doing his Man of Steel thing where he crouches on the ground before flying up into the sky. And he tells Valdez, I'll catch up. And Valdez says, And then he throws her at Yaira, and she just says, oh, and then reaches out with a lasso and ropes Yaira by the throat. Okay, I didn't copy these panels to show you anything wrong. There's nothing actually wrong here. But there is a humongous missed opportunity in that, the Soska sisters had to have read the script by Chuck Dixon about Alpha Core. And so they should have had a much deeper understanding of these characters than they appear to at this point. Because what you don't see in these panels is any kind of banter between Ingrid Valdez and Solari that would be, number 1, entertaining, and number 2, true to the characterizations given by Chuck Dixon in Alpha Core number 1. I would expect to see something in here like, sorry, I hate being a passenger. And then says, oh, really? Well, it's time to get off. And then she says, what? And then he throws her and she says, hey, like, Solari, all right, I better make this count. And then she goes and ropes Yaira. But that would at least show a sense of playful banter between the two of them, given the fact that they don't really like each other. There's a little bit of, you get to experience their personalities better. And so they just kind of passed this on by and went for straight up action. It's just kind of dull. Now we get to the artist trying to be creative, where you have all sorts of panel layering going on, which is a bunch of BS most of the time. And then you have this freaking, bar down the center, or the horizontal bar going through these leftmost panels, and also got a horizontal bar going through this where there's no difference in the panels. Why are you separating panels from themselves? These are single panels. It's like every freaking artist out there has to feel like, I'm going to get creative. I'm looking at this, and I feel like I'm looking at Deadpool doing a break the fourth wall thing, because he's pulling Yaira from one panel into another. This is garbage. Stop fucking around and just tell the story. It is not your job to be the next great to find the next great artistic innovation. Just be a storyteller. You can tell the story so much more clearly without those stupid lines. Okay, you've got all of your information right here presented to the reader in a much more carefully packaged form, and now we can move on. I just hate it when these artists decide, yeah, I'm going to get creative, and I don't actually care about the story. I'm just going to see how many gimmicks I can put into the book. So Valdez and Solari are swept by Yaira up into the upper atmosphere, and Solari spouts the sage wisdom, hold your breath, which of course means he's not holding his. And she says, I told you not to follow me, which means that she was talking to Alpha Core on the first page where Alpha Core was not visible. That's just poor storytelling. In the next sequence of panels, you have Ingrid Valdez keeping her eye on Yaira, presumably to rope her again, and then
Wait, they can breathe in space? I know. So because it's like a Dragon Ball situation where they can breathe in space for a certain period of time, or they can just breathe in space like Frieza.
And then Yaira suddenly disappears. Except you've got this blue streak of light on the horizon, and I'm like, okay. Does that mean she either flew all the way to the horizon and back, or that she flew around the planet entirely just to come and kick Ingrid Valdez in the stomach? In which case, I would expect Ingrid Valdez to be in two pieces or more if she's going to be going that fast. I mean, come on. What even is this? Now Yaira is dealing with Solari, and he says, "Now what, Yaira? You keep chasing me like this, Brian, and I'm going to start thinking you like me." And then she kisses him, and I'm just like, "Oh, this is gross now." Because not only is this a little bit sexual assaulty, but it's like, Solari's, well, if you've read Alpha Core, Solari's kind of a goober, and that Yaira's slumming by kissing him. But the other thing is just, this is so much more like Black Widow and a woman throwing her sexuality around instead of throwing her power around. I mean, that was one of the things I liked about Yaira in ISOM #1, was that she did not exude sexuality. She was cute. I mean, it's not that she was not an unattractive woman, but she wasn't played as an attractive woman. She was played as a powerhouse. And when to see her, I guess, stoop like this makes me lose respect for the character. I mean, she's already lost IQ points just for putting herself within range of Alpha Core when she didn't need to. But now she's losing respect from me because she's pulling this kind of garbage. Now, she's also sucking the air right out of his lungs. And by the way, this is the first time any kind of caption occurs in the comic, which tells me that basically nobody could understand what the hell's going on in this scene, and they had to add this caption in order to make it clear. This is not the first time I've seen this happen. This happened with Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog Wrecked Planet when Lily, Heather Swain's daughter, screams, and Bill Willingham gave him notes saying, "I don't know why she screams." And so Ethan Van Sciver had to add these particular captions in order to make it more understandable. So that happens sometimes. But, all right, what happens from here? Because this is where the scene ends. The atmosphere shifts, and Solari feels the air escape from his lungs, and we get nothing. I mean, does she leave them up there to die? Because that's where they're at this point. I mean, she basically suffocates Solari, and Valdez is suffocating all on her own, and they're floating around, and they're either going to burn up on reentry or they're going to suffocate up there. So what the heck? I mean, does Yaira take them back down to the ground? We don't see that happen. What happened after that scene? We don't know. We were instead transported to this scene, which you can practically smell the room, and you've got these four punks with guns and ammo who look like they're loading up for some reason, and they're commenting on the commentary that's being given by the newscaster, but we don't even know who these people are. These people are just completely out of the blue. And I know that some of them, or at least one of them, is going to factor in pretty prominently later on, but that's only because I've seen things from the previews. But otherwise, all of a sudden, we've had these four characters dropped on us for no freaking reason. This is just kind of a bad intro. And moreover, it doesn't explain what happened in the prior scene. Now, this is where I would bring in the information from ISOM #2, because when Solari says, "Braxwell and I went in pursuit after she nearly killed that man," okay, this is what would make sense. That after Solari and Ingrid got incapacitated up in the stratosphere, that Braxwell flew up there and rescued them. And then, after making sure Valdez was secure, Solari would have revived first, and then Solari and Braxwell could have gone in pursuit after Yaira, and then engaged in all aerial communications, but Yaira disappeared. That's how I would fix things. But what's sad is that I even needed to fix things. I mean, this to me was just a fuck up on the straight up fuck up on the Soska sisters' part in the exact role that they are supposed to play, which is keepers of continuity, and they just screwed the pooch right away. So let's get back to this and we'll start looking at the newscaster's commentary. These are terrifying images from today's incident with Yaira. Thank God the Alpha Corps were on site to minimize damage. Okay, we don't need that comma. I'd have hoped for better odds. Solari last fought Yaira to a standstill on his own. You would have thought this would have been an easy fight. Okay, you would have thought this would have been an easy fight. We know from the Ide up above that contractions are allowed. Let's use one here to break up the repetition. You'd have thought this would have been an easy fight. And now the newscaster contradicts himself. You'd have thought this would have been an easy fight. There is no easy fight with Yaira. You see, what I think happened here is that there's actually two newscasters who were supposed to have been drawn in the same scene, and they're talking to each other. But because the artist came back and only drew one newscaster, all of the dialogue had to be given to that one newscaster, and it didn't, and nobody noticed that the newscaster was suddenly contradicting himself. You need to have some sort of transition, such as, you'd have thought this would have been an easy fight, but it seems there is no easy fight with Yaira. And yada yada from there. Now you've got Solari breaking in. And here he makes probably one of the worst heel moves I've ever seen from a supposedly heroic comic book character. Okay, that's enough. This isn't a TV spot for Yaira. Okay, obviously he's showing vanity now. I could fend off the likes of Yaira on my own easily. I have before and I will again. But I'm not alone anymore now, am I? Oh, really? So you're blaming the fact that you have teammates for your failure to capture Yaira. As if, you could have done it alone if you just hadn't had to worry about them, especially about Ingrid Valdez. Correct me if I'm wrong, dude, but wasn't it your screw up that freed Yaira in the first place? I mean, Ingrid Valdez was basically choking Yaira out, and then you came along and yanked her away from Valdez, and that was what gave Yaira the upper hand, where she could use her weather powers to send y'all up into space. So he screwed up, and he's throwing Ingrid Valdez, and presumably Braxwell too, under the bus. And I'm just looking at this, and I'm starting to come around to something that Ethan Van Sciver said a while back. And that's that there are no likable characters in the Rippaverse. Now, I'm still partial to Avery Stillman. I still think he's a basically decent character, if confused and not always thinking straight. Altona, she's generally a good character. So I don't think the Rippaverse is completely devoid of good characters, of characters you can feel good about. But boy, it really has very, very few. And most of its heroes are indeed jerks. I mean, Yaira comes across as a jerk. You got Ingrid and Solari coming across as jerks. Even Braxwell, though he rarely says anything, comes across as pretentious because
So if this guy's being like this version of Superman, he's not really giving that good of an impression, given their previous encounter. In his characterization, looked like he's more like a gruff general guy. Like, since he got superpowers, maybe he was experimented on from the government, and that's how maybe he got his powers. But so far, he doesn't really have that Superman personality.
he could talk if he wanted to, because he does sometimes. And then you've got Gooding. I mean, he's a nice guy, but he's pushy as hell. So there are just all of these different ways in which all of these characters' flaws just dominate them. And of course, Brian Solari is a huge idiot in Alpha Corps #1. So to see him, preening like this is just sickening, and it turns you against Solari as a character. this is not a fight between two heroes anymore. This is more of a fight between this rogue called Yaira and this, I don't know, jackboot enforcer called Solari. It's not an entertaining book at that point if you can't find a side to root for. So now we come to a scene which really, it uses a trope that I've seen too many times, which is the multiple monitor trope. She's watching CNN on 9 different monitors. I'm sorry, the only time you ever in real life watch the same program on 9 different TVs is if you're TV shopping and trying to compare them. All right? In this particular case, she should just have it either all up across all 9 monitors, the same image, or she should just have the image up on one monitor. It is ridiculous to show this on all 9. I mean, it's just, nobody's going to watch that. Now, sometimes this can be used to good effect, if you, especially if the image that you're showing multiple times is something that is offensive to the person who is watching it. So, for example, you've got Amazing Spider-Man 389, the closing scene in which the Green Goblin on video is tormenting Spider-Man, and the fact that he's got all these multiple images saying the same word over and over again is just more and more tormenting to him. So that is a good use of the multiple monitor trope. But if you're going to use multiple monitors anywhere else, like in this kind of Batcave-ish scene, you need to have multiple things on the monitors. Or else you have to have some sort of, offensive image of some sort that you're showing to somebody to get a rise out of them. But you don't have this just some banal thing on 9 different monitors. I mean, nobody does that. And you really want to not strain the bounds of credulity beyond what you have to for a comic book. I mean, yes, people have ice powers, but do people watch 9 TVs at once? Generally, no. So this is actually the panel that convinced me that Rippaverse still has nobody worth calling an editor. Because there's no way in hell you are going to send a book to print if you are the editor on this book and have the mistake I'm going to show you in there. First, there's just a minor typo where she says, "Wow, exciting stuff. Now, on to the scene earlier this week." It should be "on to the scene earlier this week." 2 words, on to. When Projexis welcomed its newest member, the highly controversial and equally highly acclaimed, and then Solari breaks in and says, "We will find you and we will bring you to justice." And you will have a comma there. Now, this interruption, if it was, kind of a comical, I'm coming in, I'm breaking in, you're trying to move on, but I'm going to get this one last line in before we go, and then the next page is going to be something wholly other, that would be fine. But what Solari is doing here is actually interrupting an actual transition, because on the next page, you have the words being spoken by the newscaster continued by Lincoln Eusebius on the next page. So Solari's words are coming right in the middle. Now, we've got some cleanup to do on the bottom as well. Biologist and archaeologist, who we feel, it should be whom we feel, is going to be an undeniable asset here at Projexis, period. Won't you please join me in welcoming to our team, ... Okay, so now all that's fixed. But the point is that on this page, you've got text, dialogue text, bleeding over from one page into the next and completely interrupted by the text on the right-hand side. This is just a total fuck-up. You should not have Solari interrupting right in the middle of that. And what's really sad is that the way to fix this is so simple. There you go. It's all fixed. We will find you and we will bring you to justice. Wow, exciting stuff. Now, on to the scene earlier this week when Projexis welcomed its newest member, the highly controversial and equally highly acclaimed biologist and archaeologist, whom we feel is going to be an undeniable asset here at Projexis. Won't you please join me in welcoming to our team? And let me explain why this is important, why you can't have that interruption there that was on the previous page. You need this to flow. Why? Because of this. Earlier this week, we're actually going back in time when we turn the page. And if Solari jumps in and breaks that stream of thought, the reader's not going to remember that. The reader's going to remember that Solari broke in here and then, okay, well, I guess this somehow links together with the dialogue from the first thing. But then you lose the sense that you're actually looking back on an earlier event in the week. It is important to keep these two dialogue balloons together and have them flow together so that when the reader comes here, the reader understands that this is actually a segment from earlier in the week because no timestamp is given on these pages. Now, as for the press conference itself, it's pretty much wrote a copy of what was in the Yaira live action trailer. It looks like all of the dialogue that was in that trailer was lifted almost directly from pages of Yaira. So all of that is fine. The only thing being is that I keep hearing these freaking words in the cursed accent of Morgan Boots that she affected for the Yaira live action trailer. And I really, really wish I didn't. I would just like to be able to to hear these words in my head in a normal voice instead of in that butchered Icelandic accent. But as far as punctuation goes, the punctuation is fine, except for these three items. I would actually put a colon at the end of triumphant echoes from the past, because what is in the next dialogue balloon, the smaller dialogue balloon in the second panel, are those triumphant echoes from the past, and those are going to be in quote marks. So this is how that should appear. Other than that, nothing to say about the remainder of it, but my God, people, you've got to up your game. You had, especially this particular problem where you needed to shift this around. I mean, I would have put my foot down and said, you're not printing the book with this screw up in there. You can't break the flow, and the fix is so easy, there's no excuse not to do it. And I just can't believe that out of all of the people on this list, there is nobody capable of seeing this kind of stuff. Eric is always talking about how, Kanan White came on board. Man, he's taken Deborah Carey-Taw's art up to the next level. He's really upped her game and all that. Well, y'all need to up your game. Because although I will say that this book has a feeling that it's tighter than the Rippaverse books that have come out before, which is an indicator of improvement, it is still not at a level of sufficient quality to be worthy of respect. So get on the ball trying to figure this stuff out. Watch my videos, see the kinds of things that you missed both in this Yaira #1 video and in previous Rippaverse videos. See what you're supposed to be looking for. Get someone who understands English punctuation. Get someone who understands, how to check for words. Hire a proofreader if you need one, and hire someone who actually knows how to edit comic books, because I still don't think you have that person in your arsenal yet. So that is my review of Yaira #1. Rippaverse still has no editors. This is the first of what will be a few, I hope, review videos, and I'm going to stop here because we're getting into a lot of text and a lot of new concepts being introduced, it looks like, in the next section of Yaira #1, and I want to be able to treat that as its own separate subject. So thank you for watching. Please be on the lookout. Do subscribe so that you'll be notified of when my next Yaira review comes out, and any of my other videos. I've got a particularly funny short exposing an epic trolling by one of Styx Hexenhammer's followers. Styx Hexenhammer is a co-host on The Quartering, and he got trolled massively by one of his followers into dissing Eric July. And also, I show you my proof of ownership of Yaira number 1, where I show you not only the reading copy I'm using, but the copy that I'm shredding for scans. So you can see that on there. So there's plenty of stuff on my channel to watch for, and I hope you will become a subscriber if you're not already. And I will talk to y'all later.
Okay, so that was a good, interesting review bit for first Yaira comic. Yeah, I do agree. It could use a bit more editing and more supervision just to make sure it's polished enough. And because it looked like this looks like a first or second draft and no lookovers. But I guess to be it for this video. Might do some more of these in the future. And if you think you would prefer me to do some more of these, make sure to put it in the comment section down below. If you like this type of content, maybe give it a like and a subscribe. And if you have any other Rippaverse type of comics you want me to look at, give my critiques on, then write them down in the comment section down below. Until then, have a nice one.